Welcome, everyone. We have another session with our friend David Bishop at Brick Meets Click. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. How's your impacted hair?
It's coming along fine. Thanks for asking.
You're welcome. I was concerned there for a while.
It's been touch and go.
So, Happy New Year. It's good to see you.
Same to you.
Now we have some interesting data that you're releasing. Can you tell me about December's eGrocery Insights results?
So, since we've been tracking since the start of the pandemic, each month for the most part, for the month of December 2021, we finished up at $8.9 billion for online sales. Now, that includes ship to home, pickup, and delivery. And while that's notable, it's still slightly below the highs that we had earlier in the year. I think stepping back and seeing the woods from the trees, so to speak. We've reached almost 100 million. I think in our release we mentioned that we generated approximately $98 billion in
Yeah.
sales for the calendar year. So just stepping back and not only looking at what happened in December, but what happened in 2021, keeping in mind that this is really essentially the second year of the pandemic. We're almost at $100 million mark, which is quite impressive. Again, something that we are all preparing to compete for in the future, but very few, if any of us, were really prepared to compete for today.
Your data shows online share of monthly spend is consistently in the 12 to 13% range. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so December 2021 ended just shy of 13%. And again, just to be clear, that's 13% of total grocery spending in the US was accounted for or originated online. Again, that could have been for ship to home, delivery, or pickup. If you look at that versus 2020, which is again really the year of disruption, when in early March we had the pandemic and then the lockdowns shortly following that, and we really didn't have any vaccinations. We were probably around 10% to 11%. So we've had a 2 percentage point gain in online share of total grocery spending in just a year over year basis. And if we were to exclude ship to home, as most conventional grocers or regional grocers, as you know, Mark, don't offer that service,
Mhm.
we would still be sitting around 10% at the year end 2021 for delivery and pickups contribution of total grocery spending. So we have come a long way in a short time. The magnitude or scale of which it's contributing to the top line for grocers means it's an imperative to address the issues surrounding this business and find ways to improve that path to profitability. And you and I have talked a lot about the importance of the 3 C's or other aspects of it. This just simply reinforces the point that the time is now to tackle these extremely important strategic issues from a grocer's perspective.
There was a number that surprised me. You observed the grocery reversed its position relative to mass when measured against repeat intent rate. Can you dig into this a little more?
Historically, and if we say historically, using just the previous few months as the lens
Right,
for that
right.
perspective, I mean, mass has consistently outperformed on this metric as compared to grocery. And why that is important is, someone who uses a service, um, their likelihood to repeat is critical to building that revenue base from an existing customer because of the value associated with someone who becomes more experienced, more familiar, or more loyal, whatever term we want, with a service. So when we look at December, we saw a closure of the gap between mass and grocery, which is a good sign for grocers. But that could be the result of a variety of factors. Obviously, circumstances could be one. With Omicron, skyrocketing right now, we could have people who are simply indicating a higher likelihood to use in the next 30 days because of the state of COVID. at the levels we are, there may be a level of concern that we haven't seen recently. And while vaccines were kind of muting that type of swing earlier with Delta, because Omicron is breaking through, we're starting to see some different maneuvers. So it's a very complex position. Obviously, it could be that they're improving their performance or execution, but we simply can't tell from just the numbers we have. Um, what we need to see, more importantly, is consistent improvement and a consistent level of execution. We've seen that on the mass side. We really have yet to see that fully play out on the grocery side. So while it's a positive sign, and we should, welcome that, what we really want to see is, that trend continue and stabilize, where we have trust that actually the execution is playing out the way we intended.
David, what surprised you the most when putting together the December 2021 insights?
The thing that continues to surprise me is really the importance of seeing the bigger picture from the shopper standpoint. And as you know, Mark, you and I talk, and we
Mhm.
talk about what we see from our different vantage points. And when I'm talking to grocers and looking at the data, one of the things that continues to jump out to me is the importance of having that 360 view of the household in terms of not only how they shop, but where they shop. So it's not sufficient for a retailer to rely only on their own data as a basis of informing what they should be doing. They really need to be reaching out and taking advantage of all the external resources. We're just one amongst many. And so, from that standpoint, that's one thing that stood out. I mean, the other is, we continue to say, the stickiness has really become clear. We have an extremely large, elevated base of
Mhm.
active users shopping online still after over 18 to 20 months. And that indicates a level of acceptability. And while we do expect some additional volatility or contraction as we hopefully move through this pandemic, as we know people prefer to shop in the store, the duration of which this disruption has occurred has really entrenched a new behavior for a large group. And while it's not 100% of their shopping trips, it's a sizable amount, as we already know that we're running kind of consistently around 12 to 13% of total grocery spending going online. So, it's again a reaffirmation that online is here to stay, and here to stay at a level that we weren't really prepared for. We still aren't prepared for. So we should have the same degree of urgency in terms of retesting our assumptions
Mhm.
and re-challenging our strategies and refining how we execute those, because clearly we're in a different stage that, again, we weren't prepared to be living today.
Now, David, you've stated that average order value increases the more a customer uses a retailer's online service. What should grocers take away from this?
Well, right now, the first question and the most pressing question that we're receiving is, where do we find new customers? Right. So customer acquisition is very high on the priority today. Now, let's keep in mind, stepping back, that over 70% of the US households have purchased groceries online somewhere, some way, sometime over the last year.
Mhm.
So that's the pool we're all fishing in. The other 30%, if COVID didn't get them online, the question is what will. Unfortunately,
Right.
a medical emergency is really what's going to do it. So if we're so fixated on attracting new customers, what we should be equally focused on is, how do we onboard those customers? And so if we're looking at that first time customer, we need to absolutely remind ourselves and everyone around us that first time customer lacks familiarity with our tools, and they're unable to leverage the power that technology affords us in making a more seamless shopping experience, simply because the algorithms and the tools haven't yet learned our preferences or our patterns of purchasing. So, moving from that first to second is critical. We see a commensurate jump in AOV as well as intent. And then we see the same thing occur from the second to third order and the third to fourth. By the time we get to the fourth and compare the fourth order to the first order customer, we've gone from 50% repeat intent with the first time to 80, mid 80s
Mm-hmm.
for the fourth or more. And what we see in the average order is similarly something close to between 10 and 20% lift in those AOVs,
Wow.
depending on what metrics we're looking at, that gradually accrue as you bring that in. Now, the reason for that is as a person becomes familiar, they begin to understand the value of the service, which means they begin to trust the ability of the retailer. And when they build that trust, they then start to order other items that
Mm.
maybe they were less likely to try before. At the same time, now they have technologies that forwards them to use list building or past purchases to remind them about what they should be considering to put in their basket, or they may be better able to be served up more personalized offers based on their past purchase or search history. So, by getting to that third or fourth, as you know probably better than I do, Mark, technology can then truly enhance the way someone shops. That first time, though, unfortunately, technology can only do so much. So while the focus is on acquiring new customers, and that's absolutely critical for building the base, what's going to be critical in 2022 is how do we grow the top line when finding new customers has become not only more challenging, but more costly. And that's going to automatically shift focus to how do we really nurture and engage our existing customers. And, while we want to focus on the third and fourth, what we really have to do is look at that 1/5 of our customer base that is maybe coming in for the first time and saying, how do we bring that number and shift more of them to that second order and on, so that we begin that onboarding process. There's no magic
Mm-hmm.
bullet, as you know, but that's where a lot more resources need to be focused in the very near term, because if we look at the paybacks based on winning a new customer, that just guarantees the customer comes for one order. What we then need to do is focus, how do we win the next order and then the third order, right? So it goes beyond simply winning new customers to winning more orders with our new customers.
Yeah, awesome insight. David, when you look at the state of online grocery today, what do you see that others might miss?
Well, I think the obvious thing that we see that others miss is we see the whole picture. If you think about the fable or the old story of the seven blind men or people feeling the elephant all from different parts of the body and then trying to describe what the elephant looks like, we're somewhat in that state.
Mm-hmm.
A retailer who only relies on their data, if they're only in delivery, they have very little visibility, if any visibility, into what's going on with pickup. And so in the conversations that we've had with retailers, really it's about how are you expanding your view of how and where and when your customers are shopping online, because that will reveal the opportunity gaps that will help you prioritize, what and where to focus your resources going forward. And at the same time, we could have the same discussion around delivery and looking at things like the emergence of rapid delivery or
Mm-hmm.
quick commerce, and understanding, well, what role, if any, does that play within the context of a conventional regional grocer, as opposed to maybe convenience retailer or a fast casual, food service provider. These are aspects that we're interrogating, as you know, Mark, by trying to look at it from the context of a brick and mortar grocer and understanding what these things mean to their business, so that we focus on what matters most, not only to our customers, but to our core business.
Excellent. David, it's been a pleasure speaking with you once again, and I look forward to next time. For those who don't know, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, so they can find me there. Just use my name; it's on the screen. Email david.bishop@brickmeetsclick, and we'll go from there. If you're nice and we get along, I'll give you my phone.
Awesome. Awesome. Folks, it's been a pleasure as usual. Till next time, I'm Mark Fairhurst from Mercatus. Check out www.mercatus.com and brickmeetsclick.com for David's information.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, David.